Yeah, we'd like to welcome Brother Johnny Achi, a continued contributor to our understanding of the crisis in Syria. Johnny represents the Arab Americans for Syria and has done extensive media coverage presenting another point of view, presenting the point of view of Syrians who believe in their sovereignty from Saudi, U.S. financed Islamic terrorist groups that seek to overthrow the government of Syria, a government that has provided equality for women, for Christians, for Jews, provided a high quality of life and standard, making it an economic powerhouse within that part of the world. And of course, we know that the United States constantly, as with Western Europe, seeks to make colonies out of independent, strong third world governments. We'd like to welcome you for an update, Brother Johnny.
Hello, Dylan. Thanks for having me again on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Can you give us an update? I know recently it was in the news that it's been documented now that U.S. troops are being trained in Jordan as part of the rebel offensive against the government of Omar Bashir.
I sure will. If
Assad, excuse me. Go ahead.
Assad. Yes, I will. However, I do want to mention a report that was I just read about members of the German government citing classified reports that on May 25th of last year, a massacre in the Syrian town of Hula, attributing responsibilities for the massacre to anti-government rebel forces, or treating this as the most probable scenario. The reason I want to mention this, even though it's an older incident, because from day one, Didan, and everyone I talk to in Syria today, and I talk every day to people in different parts of the country, they always tell me, Johnny, please let them know about the truth. Please try to tell them what is really happening in Syria. So we do feel that the media is the main reason why we are today where we are. And we feel that Al Jazeera, and I've mentioned this before on the show, but I do feel responsible that I have to mention it again, they are part of the spilling blood. They're partners in the spilling of the blood on the Syrian soil. From day one, they never showed you the armed rebels. They never showed you that there is militants. We're not saying that everybody was. Yes, there was peaceful protests in very rural areas, but they never showed you the truth. I was in April 2011 in Syria. I've never seen any protests. On the contrary, I've seen millions go out in rallies in support of the government and in support of the reform programs that Bashar Assad did when the Thawra happened in Tunisia and Libya and Egypt. We wanted to avoid that. So he immediately put a reform program. Everybody was out happy that we don't have to go into war. We want to go into a more democratic Syria in a peaceful way. Al Jazeera never showed those millions. On the opposite side, they showed only the 200-300 people that were protesting somewhere in rural communities. Everybody who died in Syria the first couple of months, it's just maybe a couple of hundred, more of them were from the police force. And the Al Jazeera would say even the police force were killed by the army for refusing to take aim or to shoot at peaceful protesters. They did this for 6 months. And unfortunately, at that time, Al Jazeera was the only source of information. And here's another story. Even Reuters, CNN, BBC were getting their report from Al Jazeera as being a credible source. Al Jazeera somehow was the only one to be in the Hula massacre. And before the Hula, there was Karm al-Zaytun massacre. And before that, there was another massacre in Khardiyeh. Those massacres always happened on the eve of a United Nations resolution when they were trying to draft a resolution against Syria. The Syrian government, of course, if anything, they wanted to be quiet on that day where they're trying to defend themselves against a possible NATO intervention. And they're trying to present to the world in a diplomatic way that Syria is not killing people, that Syria wants truth, wants dialogue. So those events happened on the eve. And always Al Jazeera was first. Al Jazeera was going before the blood even is dry, and they will film. At one incident, there was a lady that was not even dead yet, and the guy was still filming it on Al Jazeera Live, saying, look what Bashar did, look what Bashar did. If I would walk into a place like this, and I would see something, the first thing I do is to see someone need help, I would bring them some water trying to save them, not continue to film in a very cold blood. So I do need to emphasize the fact that Al Jazeera and Qatar, of course Al Jazeera is Qatar, and Qatar is now openly. It's no longer hiding the fact that they are arming and funding the insurgencies in Syria. So they cannot be a true media reporting agency.
You know, it's interesting that this question of perception management is really just one of the central tactics used by military interventionists, governments who seek to dominate, overthrow independent governments. And I know with Al Jazeera being financed totally by Qatar, as well as being in Qatar being an active player, not only in Syria but also in Libya, that in fact it's become very almost like an Obama, where you have an Arab informed, but in essence representing the interests of European imperialism against the interests of the third world.
Exactly. Qatar is doing that through Al Jazeera, and Saudi Arabia is doing that through Al Arabiya. The two biggest Arabic TV networks, and they're used specifically for what they call this Arab Spring. If it wasn't for when they show these, today when you see thousands of mercenaries in Syria, you ask them, why do you come? They say specifically from the images we saw on Al Jazeera. So when you try to present, blood and women and children massacred, and you tell them it's the Syrian army, well, the Syrian army was not even near the area. The next day, all the diplomatic ambassadors, they left Syria, more economic sanctions against Syria. Then they tell you, okay, well, the people need to defend themselves. So now we can arm the insurgency. What's
interesting is these images from Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera is inflaming unemployed youth throughout the Islamic world, North Africa, and Arab world to come and join the defined targets by Al Arabiya, by Al Jazeera, and by CNN. So they're taking all this pent-up anger that young people have, especially Islamic youth, and these cats are becoming jihadists, fighting against these images that are being manufactured, like the wag the tail, being manufactured by media, wag the dog, being manufactured by European and Western media, which has a major impact on Al Jazeera, because Al Jazeera, as you well know, is established in the United States, and of course, for the United States to bring in Al Jazeera, certain political, ideological compromises were made, deals were made.
Exactly, and that's what they drive people into jihad war, what they call holy war.
Mm-hmm.
You show them enough images, you call for a jihad in Syria, and that's what Al Jazeera and Arabiya and dozens other Saudi Arabia's religious channels, all they talk about is to go to jihad in Syria. So now, that brings us up to what is happening today. A lot of people are asking me today, is the tension between North Korea and the U.S. has anything to do with Syria? Of course, I laugh, and I say I don't think so. But Russia's impromptu Black Sea war games that started last week, I think it has a lot to do with what's going on in Syria.
Absolutely,
two things happened. NATO on March 20th revealed it was developing contingency plans for a Libya-style intervention in Syria. That was on March 20th. A couple of days later, we see President Obama in Israel, which he brokered an end to the diplomatic rift over the Israeli attack, if you remember, on Marmara in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So Turkey and Israel, which are the northern and southern borders of Syria, have mended their relationship. So now we see this American empire, which America, U.S., obviously the U.S., U.K., France, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Israel, the 7 countries that are involved in Syria are all on the move. You see Qatar and Saudi Arabia no longer hiding the fact that they're arming and funding insurgencies in Syria. Washington Post talked about the CIA training, and that's what the point you brought, training armed rebel camps in Jordan, and we know they already exist in Turkey, and then sending them into Syria. Of course, Israel and Turkey have been forced to mend fences for the sake of this empire's war on the Syrians. And of course, Britain and France, they openly still wanting to arm the rebels in Syria. So we see that everybody is on the move trying to repeat what we see, a scenario, the Libyan scenario. Now, one more act was really funny is this SNC, the Syrian National Council. They have done in the Arab League, they give the seat of Syria's seat at the Arab League to the SNC, just like they did with the Libyan National Council, a year ago or 2 years ago in the Libya incident. Now, I do want to mention also on the Daily Telegraph today, I read an article talking about that today Syria has more terrorists than the whole world combined. So more than Afghanistan and Iraq and Mali, add them all up, they're all in Syria today. So if anybody is fighting a war on terrorism, like the U.S. claims to be, then I would recommend leave Afghanistan and everywhere else and come to Syria. At least if you don't want to fight the war on terrorism in Syria, stop supporting the terrorism in Syria, because that's where we're going. The Syrian army is defending the cities today as we speak. It's trying to gain back a small district of Aleppo. It's a Christian community that they entered 3 days ago, that Nusra Front, the terrorist organization, entered 3 days ago. We don't know the exact numbers yet, but they have had a list of all the Christian families. They went and raped and slaughtered women. They killed the cleric, the religious Sunni man. They decapitated his head and put it on the top of the mosque. They've done atrocities, and today the Syrian army is trying to claim this, trying to liberate this, and I'm afraid that we're going to hear of some really sad numbers coming out of that town. So that's what the Syrian army is doing right now, fighting these terrorists who are coming from all over the world, trying to break down Syria and divide it and to, make it surrender to the U.S. and imperialist powers.
Well, we thank you. We've seen the same thing done in Afghanistan, the same thing done in Libya. Wherever you find a non-popular, non-violent movement, where people are just making demands for social change, all of a sudden these global jihadists are coming in to create violence instead of climbing for disaster capitalism for the United States to dominate and make super profits. We thank you very much, Brother Johnny, from the Arab Americans for Syria. We thank you very, very much for the update, and continue on, my brother, providing us another point of view. We appreciate it very much.